Alright, I'm going to do a video here. This is something I'm working on. I haven't finished it. It's just a project in the works. But a gentleman on one of my forums tonight, or one of my comments tonight, asked about a pot that collected energy to use for charging things. See the World Truth or something like that? I don't know exactly. Maybe I'll put it in the down below somewhere to mark who he was. But he had mentioned this pot that would collect electricity, and you could charge things off of it. And that's very similar to the BioLite camp stove that Hiram Cook has just demonstrated. And I'm really interested in that. So what I did was I went ahead and started collecting some devices. This is my old Fruit cook pot for wood pellets and wood. And what it is it's not quite a gasifier stove, so it doesn't really work like that. But what I had down here is I have airflow coming in from an outer paint can to an inner soup can. And the inner soup can has holes along the top and along the bottom so the air can flow in, and then as it comes to the top, possibly that air can circulate around. But that's basically all it is, and basically you can just throw... I have this inner thing where if I throw the wood pellets in there, you have to have some way to get air in there because they clog up all the air, and this is just not enough. So I leave an airflow for this. But I've always said if I had a fan on the bottom of this, blowing air in, it could then get in real easily. So I'm taking my fruit can, which is just a paint can, as you can see here, with a wire mesh screen that goes on top of it. And actually this stores in the bottom of it, which I'll show you when I'm done here. All this stores inside there. And I'm going to add this device over here that you can see here that I've kind of thrown together, but I don't have the main piece, the actual Peltier. Peltier, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I'm not sure how thick a Peltier is, but I just want to put ahead and throw some of these aluminum pieces in there to demonstrate where it would sit at. So this fan will run off of the energy coming out of the Peltier, and it will blow air that way. So I'll actually probably build another one of these very similar to this, where the airflow comes in directly from the bottom down here from this stove, goes underneath, and comes up through the bottom of the can. So I'm going to take this apart now that I've shown it to you together here. I'm going to go ahead and show you how it would assemble. The fan will blow in that direction and go inside of the canister, outside shell of the canister, and force air from the bottom up, creating a forge, more or less. The heat inside of here, I'm going to go ahead and take the camera off the stand here real quick and show you what the inside looks like. And I just have a weight in there right now because the way it's set up, it just won't balance without a weight in it. I'll have to manufacture something to hold this side up so it doesn't tip over. I just put a big old lead weight in there right now to hold it in place for the picture. This copper rod is a vacuum sealed copper rod that comes around the back of this heat sink and seals to the back of this aluminum piece of metal. Okay? So there's holes in the very bottom of that can. There's also holes up here. I don't know if I'll need those or not. But those holes in the bottom of the can would be where the air from the fan would shoot upward. Whether or not I need these holes or not, I don't know. I may not put them on the second round. So that would then catch this, get it hotter, causing heat to come across here, down here, and go through this heat sink. Okay, and as I mentioned, I was using something as a spacer. I'm guessing the Peltier device won't be much thicker than this. That was my spacer I was kind of showing you. I'm not sure how big it will be. I ordered 2 of them. We'll see how they come in. They're coming from China. I'm not sure if they're the good ones or not. They may not be. If they don't work the first time, I'll buy some new ones. So this device has the copper, which will absorb the heat from the opposite side of the Peltier. So if the Peltier were sitting on here like this, it would actually draw the heat out of the Peltier and sink it into this aluminum here and out these tubes into this vented copper, to which I have the fan sucking air off. Actually, the fan will go this way because it is sucking air off of that copper and blowing it back in to the bottom of the pot. So what this is doing is it's making a forge that runs off of its own energy. This is not going to be something that I'm going to try and charge my devices off of while I'm out camping. It may be that in the future. That's what the BioLite is. But in order to get to that degree, I would have to create something to regulate the output power of the Peltier so as not to put out too much power and not to put out too little power so that I could charge things. And that may be something I look at in the future, but I think the Peltiers that I bought are not going to put out that much power. Now, the real question is will the Peltiers I bought put out enough to run a fan? This fan, maybe not. This is actually a 24 volt, 1.4 watt fan. I don't know that this fan will be enough to run off of that. But I can get other fans and try different fans and see what will run off of it. And once I find one that will run off it, if it's got enough airflow, that's great. If not, well, then that defeats the whole purpose of having the Peltier on there, because if it can't run the fan off the power it creates, that's useless. I don't want to have any batteries in this system. I really want it to just run off of its own electrical current that it's creating through the Peltier. And that's what my goal is to have basically a little cook pot that is a forge as well. And I mentioned that this will slide in and out. I've got a little rubber gasket on here. The rubber gasket, I'm afraid, will melt at this point, so I may have to... Sorry, I turned the thing off. The rubber gasket, I'm afraid, will melt at this point, so I'll have to switch to something else there. Maybe just an open space for it to slide into. I don't know. I had a rubber gasket handy. I was trying that. The bottom of this... Let me get the big lead weight out of this. The bottom of this opens up, so it's not a permanent closure. It does pop in pretty good and stays, but it also opens up. Now, this rusts real easy because it's all metal. If this works out, my goal would be to make this out of stainless steel instead of metal. So I'm working on that. I have a pot that's a potential inside-outside pot for stainless steel, which won't rust as bad. Now, it's not quite the height that I'd like it to be, but I've got this double pot that's stainless steel on the outside and stainless steel on the inside. So I don't know if that's a big enough pot. It may not be, but because these two items won't rust. It also has this little hook on the side. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. I may take it off and leave it on. So that could be my inner and outer pot, such as this is my inner and outer pot. It wouldn't give me access to the bottom of it, but it would be a nice pot to work with because it has the rim where it can sit on there. So that might be enough. I don't know. I might have to seal that shut once I get everything in place. Anyways, this current one, I just flipped this, so the pot's like this when you're cooking, right? What you do is to go to store it is you flip it over, slide this, see the little lips are upside down now, in the bottom of here, and then seal that back in there. And this is an idea I got from Hiram Cook. It's I think he calls it his fruit stove. Maybe it's not the fruit stove, but anyways, the inside of this is a fruit can, the outside's a paint can. And then this is the little insert I was telling you about. If you're just using this with wood pellets and you're not trying to do anything else with it, there's no airflow. So that's the stove on its own, the wood pellet stove. The method I'm trying to go for now encompasses using two heat sinks. This one I actually modified. This had those fins all along here too, and it was a heat sink for a piece of computer equipment, and it had fins all along here that I tore off because I don't want those fins to have to go in and out of the fire. Plus, if those fins were on there, it would actually cool the device down before the heat transferred down to this. Now, I did do a heat test on this. I hit this with some heat, just an alcohol flame, and I tested this, and this side was 90, and this side was 187. And that was an alcohol stove, a miniature little burner, which is right here. I used this burner, not a very big one, no donut wick on there or anything. And I was just underneath like this high. The flame was about that far from it. And like I said, this side was in the 90s, bouncing around the 90s, and this side was up around 190 over here. So that's a lot of temperature over here, which is what I'll put my Peltier against. It'd be nicer if I had a little bigger space. I'm not sure how big that Peltier is. If the Peltier is this big, that's not really covering as much as you need it to, and you're not getting as much out of it. So I may look around for a little bit larger one of these. I do have this one, which is much larger, and this may be the way to go. I'd have to smooth this off first because this is not a smooth surface. This also had vents on here. I knocked them all off. But this one I tested, and this side was in the 90s, but the other side, because there's 3 pieces of copper coming down, was really hot. I can't remember what this got up to, but it got really hot. However, if I recall correctly, I wasn't testing this over the alcohol stove. I was testing this with a torch, which is why it's changed color so much. And actually, when I was bending it, I broke one right there. I think had I not broke this, I would have transferred all that heat down. So this one would work really well if I sand this down and get it real smooth for the piece to touch against it. The difference is this one works where the thought was I was going to put it in like that, further in obviously, to where it was almost right up against the stove, and then have the fan outside here shooting down across the outside of it after I put something on the outside of it here. So Peltier in between those two and the fan outside. But that would then direct the air away from the stove, and I really wanted to use the air to go back into the stove. So I'd have to create a huge tunnel going back down and under and back up. Maybe the way to go as well. I'm not sure what the best way to go is. Because this way, the heat next to the stove is still next to the stove. Whereas in my other way, the fan is right up against the stove, and it's plastic, and if it gets too close to the stove, it could also melt. So this way I keep the fan away from the stove completely. All I'm doing is blowing the hot air off of this device with air I suck through these ports here. Which I want to encompass all on something, but I'll need to leave some airflow on the sides here. So, that's my plan. We'll see how far it goes and what I get out of it. And if I can make an actual cook stove that works like a forge and gets super hot and gets the fire burning super hot and burns better. So anyways, thanks for watching, and if anybody has any input or ideas, by all means, comment below. Let me know what you think will work better, what I need to do. If somebody has some insight on where to get really good Peltier devices, let me know. I bought some on eBay. They were $6 a pop. They probably weren't the best ones. Once I get them, it'll be experimental ones. They may not work at all. If they work out really good and I like this idea, I'm willing to spend upwards of $20, $30 for the Peltier if I can get a good one. So that's my thoughts. Let me hear yours.